Okay, do you have a question as well?
Well, a comment. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for this rich debate. I am Luis Valles from the Mission of Ecuador, here in Geneva to the UN, and I cover environmental issues. My comment was about what it has been referred here in the panel and from some people from the floor about the importance to mobilize resources from developed to developing countries and how difficult it is. And very briefly, I want to give you the example of my country. In Ecuador, we have a beautiful national park called Yasuní. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, we have found oil, a huge reserve of oil under this national park. And of course, we don't want to exploit that oil. But we are asking, with a very well-structured plan done by national and international experts, with all the mechanisms of a very well-established system, audit and guarantees are there, very transparent, to mobilize resources. We have asked the international community, in exchange of not exploiting that oil, to receive some compensation to develop green technology for green energy in the Amazon jungle. This national park is in the Amazon jungle, one of the richest, as well as it has been mentioned here, one of the richest biodiversity areas in the world. But still, we have received some response, wonderful response, mainly from countries in Europe, but it's not what we expected. We wanted to create a fund that will produce 300 million per year. It's not thousands of millions. We are talking about 300 million per year. But even though it's not like it has been mentioned here, it's not a huge, enormous quantity of money. Of course, it's an important quantity of money. It's difficult. So even though, as I say, we have a very well-structured plan, we have a very well-structured mechanism for mobilizing these resources, it's difficult. What else do we need to do? Thank you.
So the response so far has been warm words, but no contribution to the fund.
Yes, there are funds already.
But there are some funds.
There are funds already, but they're still not enough for what we are expecting. We are not expecting to get the same amount of money that we will get for exploiting that oil. We are a developing country, we need that money, but still we don't want to exploit the oil. But still, we would like to get some compensation for that. We are talking about half or even less of what it will be produced from that oil to the country. Thank you.
Okay. Well, let me put that point back to Jules. I mean, there is, in effect, part of a low-carbon plan and a developing country not really getting the response that it needs.
Yes, I must admit it reminds me of a similar story from President Jagdeo of Guyana, who offered his UK-sized national forest up for the global community and wasn't able to raise the money even to create a plan for how to preserve that forest. It is truly a tragedy. I think you're absolutely right that we're going to look for mechanisms to match your specific offer to the global commons, i.e. we will not tap these oil fields, will preserve the rainforest, to funding sources. And there needs to be a mechanism whereby your plan can sort of be on the table and then developed countries can say, okay, that's a plan that we like, or that's a plan that we'll like, and we'll put our money here. The flip side of that is then developed countries will need to feel accountable for delivering a certain amount of money, because there will be a certain number of plans on the table and there will be a need to fund those plans, and developed countries will need to feel the ownership. And where the Copenhagen negotiations right now seem to be locked is what comes first? Is the plans first, or is the commitment of money first? And of course that's a bit of a negotiating question. It's also a bit of the process in the run-up to Copenhagen question. But in the end, it's also a question of trust. The global community will need to have trust in the solutions that we come up with. And I think it is very understandable that developing countries are saying, well, with all due respect, we've been looking for money and it hasn't been forthcoming, and you've made commitments in the past and you haven't delivered. So now it's time to see what you're really able to deliver. So somewhere in the course of the next months, we will need to see Europe, we need to see the United States put some money where their mouth is. Need to put some money on the table and say, okay, if we have solid plans from the developing countries that drive mitigation, that need money in order to fund adaptation, then this is the sort of money that we are willing to put on the table. And these are the mechanisms by which that money comes on the table that we can count on. Goes back to the point that Salim was making earlier. We need to have clear mechanisms, for example, a tax on aviation, possibly a tax on global shipping, possibly a automatic levy on CDMs, even if you don't like them, but mechanisms whereby we can see money coming on the table that then can get matched to your plan, the plan from President Jagdeo, other plans to say, this is what needs to happen.
And, Selim, I wonder if you'd like to comment on that last question, but actually maybe to reframe this so that maybe through innovative techniques of receiving, that those can contribute to the kind of financing that we have.
Absolutely. I think the Ecuador example and the Guyana example are very good ones of some of the developing countries actually being proactive. I can mention my country, Bangladesh, where they've also developed a national strategy, a climate change strategy, which initially focused mainly on adaptation because Bangladesh is such a vulnerable country. But when they looked at it at a more strategic level, they also included mitigation actions that the country could do and integrated it within the plan. And one of the interesting things that happened when the plan was presented to the cabinet, the finance minister was so convinced by this, he said, you know, why are we, if this is so important for us, why are we waiting for funds to come in from outside? We should be doing something ourselves. And he committed in the last budget a few months ago, $50 million from the national budget towards implementing the national climate change plan and invited other countries to contribute. And a number of countries have offered to contribute, and they're setting up a multi-donor trust fund for implementing the climate change plan. So I think that there are one or two interesting examples out there which can be highlighted, leveraged. A lot of people simply don't know about these things, that they're happening, and simply highlighting them and pointing to them as a way forward to break this old impasse of North versus South and developing country versus developed country and development assistance versus new ways of doing things. I think we have to try everything we can think of to solve this problem. There's no one single solution. There are multiplicity of solutions, and the more the merrier.
And there are immediate challenges in the next, half year up to Copenhagen, and then longer term beyond that.
Yeah, I think that what Salim just said is also a very good illustration of what I heard Lord Stern say a couple of weeks ago. If each country develops this plan that says this is how we get onto a low carbon growth trajectory, then there's some things in that plan that you would want to do just because it's in your own best interest, and you'd get on with that. And there'll be some things that some countries will do because they want to be a good part of the global commons and they want to make their contribution. And then there's going to be substantial parts, particularly in the developing countries, plans that says, okay, we would like to do this, we can do this, but we will need some financial help. And going back to your question earlier, at the first part, what can countries do that is clearly in the self-interest of these countries? We can come up with a list of 5, 6 simple good ideas that already help drive low-carbon prosperity that are in everybody's best interest. I mean, televisions and boilers and laptops that use less energy, standards for automotive, for cars that use less fuel, building codes that drive the reduction in emissions from the built environment are all policies that countries can put in place right now that don't cost incremental money or cost very little incremental money and earn themselves back very easily, certainly with oil at $70 a barrel. So in these plans, I'm sure we will find those things that countries can do in their own self-interest, those they'll do for the common good, and those where there will be a contribution needed from the developed world.
Thank you, and I will just give you the floor in just a second, but can I put the question back to you with Ecuador? I mean, how patient is Ecuador on this question? I mean, at what point with oil at $70 a barrel will you, as a country, say, sorry, we've offered this low-carbon path, we've offered the world the chance to save the rainforest, but actually, we're a poor country, there's oil, we need to sell it. At what point do you say, we're going to opt for the traditional high-carbon path?
Yes, thank you for that question. I think it was quite an important question because we did put a deadline, and it was last December. And after that, we saw that it didn't work. We have opened indefinitely. So we are expecting to still receive the participation of the international community. We are not going to exploit the oil, but still there is pressure in Ecuador. There is pressure inside of the government and outside of the government to exploit that oil.